everybody. I'm Tam, and this is my social media friend turned real life friend turned sister
friend.
MJ, and we are in her beautiful southern garden with Caribbean roots. And we're going to be talking about growing good food at home.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for joining us. Growing Good Food at Home is a series of garden conversations with everyday people that centers growing food for the body and the soul. Thank you so much for having me in your garden. Of course, I've been here before, and every time is a complete joy. So I just want to first start by saying thank you for being such a gracious host and for having me in your home and this beautiful garden.
Thank you for coming to my home.
And to get started with our conversation, I want to ask you about how you came to have an understanding of gardening and your garden appreciation. What were your initial experiences like that led you here? Because I know that there's a story for that.
There's always a story, right, Sam?
Yes.
So I would say initially very, very young. My family is from Jamaica.
Yes.
And everyone in Jamaica either has fruit trees or animals or gardens for flowers. And we had a little bit of everything. So the men in my family were butchers, and the women sold either produce or, things that people needed for their home. And so I spent a lot of my childhood in Jamaica, and our house, the top floor you had, on the outside you had, all the flowers. And then you go downstairs and go out the back, and you had the mango trees, the guavas, the avocados. And then my aunt would put in tomatoes and things like that. So that was my initial, very first from childhood. And then I grew up in Brooklyn. And one of the things Brooklyn had was a lot of abandoned lots.
Okay. Yes.
And those were turned into community gardens by the people in the community. And so I spent a lot of time walking through those gardens and saying, oh, I love this, I love this, I love this. And then my aunt had a front yard flower garden, and her husband grew brassicas in the backyard. And so those were my very first experiences. Yes.
Yes, I love that.
The main thing that I realized I always wanted to grow my own food, particularly herbs.
Yes.
Was based on cooking in the kitchen with my mom.
Yes.
So my mom is basically the family cook.
I love
And we would go to the market together, and she always wanted the freshest ingredients. And then when anyone was coming from Jamaica, they knew they had to bring my mom spices. And I mean, my mom would have bags. There's our hummingbird, Tam.
Oh.
My mom would have, they would bring her bags of all the spices, right? And so I would cook with her, and it's like, one day I'm going to grow that. Things like thyme. Oh, I can grow that here.
Yes, absolutely.
And that definitely was like, oh, when I get my space. My very first garden was actually on my fire escape. Don't do that if you live in an apartment. And I grew peppers and tomatoes and some herbs in pots.
I love that you made use of that space, and also because food and family were really ingrained in your experience, it makes sense that you would use that little bit of something to get it started.
Tiny bit of space.
Yes. I love that. Yes. And it makes sense that you continue to carry that on and really introduce your children into this now that you've been in your home and the children have been growing up. And I love that they've always been immersed in the gardens.
Yes.
And what was that important to you to have them start young and have this experience of growing?
Initially, I started the garden for my daughter. She was a toddler, literally. And we just did some pots on the deck. And I knew I wanted to grow, but I was like, this would be fun to do with her, just so
Yes.
she can see, smell, taste. I made almost all of my kids' food when they were babies.
Oh,
From
very
scratch.
cool.
And so I would try to have her taste things. Like, the average person is not going to walk and pick something and taste it. And I
Yes.
wanted her to have that experience.
Wonderful.
Hoping that it would translate to her having a great palate, because we know kids can be picky. And then eventually her own curiosity in the garden. And then my son came along, and it was basically the same thing, but we had an established garden by then. And he was just very, very curious. Like, oh, I want to touch this. I want to taste that. I want to smell this. And so that was very natural for him.
Yes. I love that for him.
Yes.
That he was curious like that.
Very curious.
And I know that he has the opportunity to experience it a little that through his school, and he's
Yes.
brought something home.
Oh, yes.
So please tell us
Oh, my
about
goodness.
his experience going from the classroom to his
To home.
home garden.
So he's, everyone at school knows that I grow a garden. And we have a school garden, but this year I actually worked with some of the staff and the students to extend that to a vegetable garden. It was all
Yes.
pollinator. But his second grade teacher, every year, my daughter had her too, she'd send home these beans and little pods, and we would hope that they would sprout. And his sprouted, and then they stayed alive. And of course, this is the year that I decided not to set up all my lights and do that whole seed start indoor. And I was like, okay, we're gonna have to keep these alive.
Yes.
And they are alive, and they're alive. And he goes to an immersion school, so he's in the Spanish language track.
Okay.
And his teacher is Hispanic, and so it's black beans.
Wonderful.
And so we planted them out in the garden, and now they're actually drying on the plant, so we can have black beans that my son started with his second grade Spanish class.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I love that, because that's going to make such a good memory for
Absolutely.
him.
And he always comes out, he's like, where's my plant?
Yes.
How's it doing? And so now that he knows where it is, he goes and he says, oh, Mommy, look, should we eat these now? And I'm like, well, if you want them to be actual black beans, dry, that we can actually cook, you need to wait. Otherwise,
Yes.
you can just, you can pop one off and taste it.
Very good.
Yes.
I love that. I love that for him. Yes, eat that.
Yes, my guy. My little farmer.
Yes. What challenges have you faced in developing this beautiful space, and how have they encouraged you to keep growing and to keep being creative?
Yes.
Because I think that creativity is so key to what that you do here.
Yes. So the main issue with this space is that we live on rock. So my area is known for rock, and I'm not talking like pebbles. I mean boulders that
Yes.
you literally cannot move. In this initial space, we took out maybe a 50-pound rock, and then another one that was probably maybe 40 pounds. You know what I mean? And so that's probably the biggest challenge of all as far as the space is concerned, is working with what we have. Is in some instances we can't move that rock.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure, you can start digging, and next thing you know, you're like, oh, I'm only 3 inches in and there's a rock. And then you keep going to see if it's something you can actually lift, and then you realize you can't lift it. And so there's a lot of that, the challenge. And then the other thing is, you live on a slope, and so there's rock and there's slope, and it's like, can I use this space? Can I not use this space? You know, how can I make it safe? I've rolled down the slope a few times.
Okay.
How can I make it safe, but how can I use it? And also, we know that certain things you plant will help shore up
Yeah.
a slope, right? So we're not dealing with erosion. So that's the biggest hurdle, naturally, for the space. And then on a seasonal basis, summer garden, everyone thinks garden summer, right?
Yeah.
That's automatic. Summer garden actually really hard.
It is.
Really, really
Yes,
hard.
it is.
Between temperature fluctuations, you might get a late frost, it could kill everything, or it's too hot, things won't grow. The pest
right.
pressure is unbelievable.
Yes, it is.
And a pest will literally decimate something that you've been looking forward to.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So seasonally, that's the hard part. I actually prefer a fall garden. That's my preference. And what motivates me to keep going is just when we pick a tomato and eat it, and you know that you grew it, and you cannot get that tomato in the supermarket, or even,
Absolutely.
quite frankly, in some of the farmers markets, you can't, right? Because people tend to stick to things that are disease resistant, you know, so they're guaranteed to have a crop, which makes sense.
Absolutely.
Whereas in your garden, you can kind of experiment and say, I'm going to grow this tomato. I know the pests are going to come.
Right.
But I know if I get even one off that plant, I'm happy. So that keeps me going. And then the challenge of challenging myself to get creative, to like raise beds, put in bricks and things like that to make the space usable. I actually love that. It's a lot of work, back-breaking work, hard work. It takes a lot of time. I'm not really the most patient person. I want it all to be done and beautiful immediately. So that's, but I keep going because it's fun. I'm encouraged by that.
Absolutely. And that's when I'm thinking back now, that's how I was first exposed to you. I think one of the first stories that I saw, you were digging out rock. And I was like, okay, sis. Come on with the strength.
Yes.
You know, digging it out and putting something beautiful,
In its place.
right in its place.
But it
And
was
I
rough.
was extremely encouraged.
Yeah, like all of this around us, this was a lot of rock. But it's beautiful now, and it shows you
is.
that you can. And I think, like where I live, we have clay soil, and people are like, oh my God, you have clay, you can't grow anything in that. And that's not true.
That's not true.
It's not
Not
true
at all.
And clay soil is actually really good soil if you know what to do
Yes, exactly.
on top of it, right? Because yes, it needs to be a little more aerated and things like that. But it's beautiful soil. And for me, I think back to, what did the indigenous people of this land do?
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
And the people before us, right? And even when I watched my great uncle garden and my aunt's garden, they didn't interfere
Right.
a lot. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And so I feel like the clay soil is a blessing for me, because once you get to a certain point, that clay is going to keep your plants alive.
Yeah.
You know, so that wasn't my challenge. I was
Yes.
okay, all right, I got clay. I know I'm going to do a little lasagna layer on top and loosen up the top so the plants can actually stretch their roots. And once they
Yes.
get down in that clay, they're pretty happy. So,
In all things, finding a way to be in unison with nature as we
Yes.
go through this process is so important.
yes, yes.
We want to try to find our balance and right. I feel like when you don't fight against it so much and just try to find a way to go with it,
Yes.
it makes for an easier experience, because at the end of the day, we should really be enjoying these spaces. We
yes.
work hard to cultivate them. We put in that sweat equity
Right.
to get them to a certain point, but then we should be able to enjoy them no matter what happens, no matter what
Yes.
is not perfect. And that's one of the things that I've learned through my garden experience is that perfection is not necessary at all. You know, and really nature is perfect on its own.
Right. My motto is, if it's meant to be here, it's going to survive.
That's right.
And if it's not, on to the next thing.
On to the next thing.
You know, because surely there are plants we'll probably see today that it's time for them to go.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
they've spent their time in the garden. They've
Yeah.
given us what we need, and now it's time for them to go.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yes.
I have several gardens. My baby is my herb garden.
Yes.
It's the perennial garden. It's where I feel most connected to my culture. So I know I'm going to pinch this and pinch that and go inside and make a very traditional Jamaican dish.
Yes.
And the herb garden, some of it is evergreen, so some of it I can pinch through the year, and some of it is going to go. And next thing you know, spring comes and you see like, oh my God, is it coming back? You know, and you look forward to that. And then I let things go to seed. There's things, it's not pretty by no means. And, you know, someone who doesn't know will say, well, why does she have that there?
Right,
But
exactly.
I know that I want that seed to drop
Yes.
so it can produce next year. And oh, by the way,
Absolutely.
that seed is also edible.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, that evolution, just letting nature do its thing. And if you want to be an organic gardener, let's say, the least amount that you touch,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
true. You know, yeah, you're
That
not gonna
is
let the
very
pests
true.
run away and take everything because you want some of your crop.
Right. Exactly.
You know, the least interference, the better.
The least interference. I do agree with that.
And I also
Absolutely.
think that's important for people who are interested in gardening, because they
Yes.
see all these beautiful gardens and they see like, oh, it's so pretty. I don't have a green thumb. No one has a green thumb.
Right.
We all just, if you go with the flow, and I want to show you that, yeah, this died. Yes, this has disease. You know, it's okay to try.
Yeah.
It's better than not trying. You'll never get to experience that delicious tomato if you don't try to grow it.
That's right. That is so true. Absolutely. And if it doesn't work out the first time, there's always another season. There's always another opportunity to try again.
Right.
And
That's
that builds our tenacity.
Absolutely.
Yes. And on that note, I would like to ask you, aside from the experience of growing your food and eating that food and what that provides for your body, what has gardening provided for your soul?
So it's definitely a solace. It's several things. So physically, it's showing me that I can.
Yes.
Right? I can. I don't have a degree in landscaping or building or any sort of like that, but I can if I try.
Absolutely.
And mentally, it's a solace. It's just a place of, I can just come and sit in here. Now, there's a million things my eyes will see that, like, oh, I should do this, oh, I should do that. But truly, in the mornings, I can come out early and just relax. When it's too hot, sometimes I still peep out here because I need that sunshine. I need that vitamin D. In the evenings, it's perfect to watch the sun go down, you know, watch the tea lights come up, the solar lights, and just breathe. And like, for example, we were away this weekend, and my daughter is texting me to say, Mommy, there's a spider in your garden. Now, while she was afraid of the spider, to me, I was like, I love that she went in the garden.
Yes.
And I'm not there, right? So she didn't go in the garden because I was in the garden.
Right.
She went in the garden because she wanted to be a part of this experience.
Yes,
And knowing her,
absolutely.
she probably just wanted to sit down and relax and take a deep breath. And
Yes.
she's 10. You can't beat that.
That's major. Yeah, that
can't
really
beat that.
is. Yes, she already appreciates
That's right.
that it brings that moment of peace and quiet and
Yes,
calm.
and calm.
Yes. Wonderful. So now that we've talked some about your existing space and what it took for you to get here, I'd like to know what dreams or hopes you have for this space or for a future space that are specific to your gardening journey.
We could be here all day. So for this space, truly, where we're sitting now is our side garden. And so I started working on the backyard garden last year, and that has proven to be a huge challenge. But my dream is so that you walk from this garden into the backyard garden and it's a world of wonder.
Yes.
Right? And so whether it's fruit, whether it's flowers, it's just, it extends the space of solace. Right? It's a little bit for everyone. So my dream is to finish up that project. No project is ever finished in the garden, just so you know. But
I would have
to take
agree.
more steps in that project, including a greenhouse. And I don't want a big fancy greenhouse. And don't get me wrong, I love those. If I had the budget for that big fancy greenhouse that they can come in and install, I would get it. But I want a greenhouse specifically for growing and for maintaining my things that really technically should be bought inside in the winter here. You know, so my plan is to have that with some solar, heat, and lights, etc., etc. And that's I want to point out the solar piece. Like, ideally, everything that I have in here, light-wise or heat-wise, I want it to be from solar energy.
Yes.
I don't
That's
want
wonderful.
to, you know, add more to the power grid. You know, and also, I think that's important for people to see that you can do that.
Yes.
You can have a growing space that doesn't require you to plug into the power grid.
Right.
So I would say that. Definitely, I would love a little plunge pool. You know, the stock tank pool.
They are so cute.
Right?
Yes.
That's my little dream. And that greenhouse, and then just more space where we can wander and places to sit and eat and talk, right? And then for my ultimate dream space. My ultimate dream is to retire, ideally in the hills in Jamaica where my family's from. But if not, somewhere in Europe on the warmer side. And possibly even Africa.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
But what I know for my dream is that I don't need a big house. Right? 2-3 bedrooms. I grew up where we're a pretty big family and we all fit in whatever space we had.
That's right.
Right? And so, but I need space. I need land.
Yes.
And on that land, I need fruit, flowers, and I need animals.
Yes. Oh,
That's my big
animals.
dream.
Yes.
Absolutely. I have to have goats. I have to have goats.
Yes.
I'm used to goats. I grew up with goats.
Yes.
I have to have chickens. I grew up with chickens. I was a chicken catcher when I was a little girl. Right? And I'd love a cow or two. I think they're beautiful animals. I think they do so much for us.
Yes.
Right? Whether you, you know, lots of people don't eat meat now, but if you eat meat, you know, or if you did in the past, they do so much for us.
Yes.
Right?
That's
And
true.
so
Very much so.
that's my big dream. Small house, warm weather, land.
And that sounds like really going back to your roots.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Having a full circle life experience, growing a family, and then going back to where you started, back to where you had that peace, and really back to home. I love that for you. I love that.
I would. Here's our neighborhood geese. Say good morning. I would absolutely love, if I had to pick one place to live, it would be in the hills in Jamaica. And my family, where we're from, is a part of the Blue Mountain chain. And if you know anything about Blue Mountain, it's very famous for coffee. And I remember on the side of the road, you would see farmers drying their coffee beans, you know, naturally in the sun. No interference from machines or anything like that. And that's my dream. I want to live that. I feel like I'm very connected to that. That speaks to my soul. And I'm a city girl. I grew up in New York City, like, and I love a good city life.
Right.
Give me a farm in the heart of the city.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that.
And I have to say one more thing I would add to that. I would love a teaching element. I would love for people to come and learn. Not that I have to be their teacher, but you know how community gardens, you can buy a plot or rent a plot or grow a plot. Ideally for me would be free. Come as you are. But come to learn.
Right.
Come to gather. Come to understand not just the space around you, but the people.
Yeah.
So that would work really, really well for me in my retirement years, as
they
say.
Yeah, I love that because community really speaks to who you are.
You know, girl.
Always having a friend.
I've never met a stranger.
Yeah, absolutely. That goes right down to the core.
That does.
Yes, it really does.
People, pets,
yes,
and friends.
There you go. And the food.
And
that
always
brings
the
it
food.
all together.
Oh my God.
Always the food.
Tam, I think, so you may have seen me digging out rock, and I think my connection to you was through the food. I was like, wait, did she say? What's she doing in there? The beets. Remember the beets?
Yes, the beets. Absolutely.
Excuse me? My name is MJ. How you growing those beets, girl? And then it was the onions.
Yes, and the onions. Yes, 'cause you know I love me an onion. I don't care what anybody says.
And so do I. There's a hummingbird again.
Oh
Gosh, did you see it?
wow, that's so awesome.
There's a story behind the hummingbird.
Yes,
Can I tell the story?
yes, please do share the
So,
hummingbird story.
Every time I come out in the garden, within the first 2 or 3 minutes, a hummingbird comes by. And at first I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I really thought back, and I love hummingbirds. And so coming from Jamaica, the national bird is the doctor bird. It's in the hummingbird family. Every time I see a hummingbird, I think it's my grandmother. My grandmother was like my girl. And so I'm old.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my grandma comes to
Yes.
visit me.
Yes, she does.
And she lets me know that you're doing great. This is beautiful. Before my uncle passed, he had said, you know, I feel when I watch you in your garden, it reminds me of my mom and your grandma. They were sisters. I see that you're connected to our roots that way. So when my grandma, I would say, here goes my grandma. Hey, girl. And sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I mean, literally, I'll come out here and here's a hummingbird immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
I love that. Yes, I love that for you. I love that you are getting that reminder and that piece of comfort. Yes. My last question for you is, what has been your best or most memorable garden moment thus far?
Oh man, ooh, that's so hard to answer. The hummingbirds are special, right? For my own, no one else, unless I tell the story, no one will know.
Yes.
Right? I would say my first successful onions.
Okay. Yes.
I was like, "Damn,
which I was able to see. Yes.
These onions is real onions." That was real special for me. And then I would say when my children, especially during COVID, when they would come out, and this garden looked a little bit different. It was like there was a bed in the middle, and it was, oh my God, it was like you were really walking into a food forest. And my kids would come out and harvest and play and find a sense of peace.
Yes.
In a world that they couldn't quite navigate. Right? They couldn't go anywhere, but they also couldn't really understand what was happening.
Yes.
So that to me is probably one of the most special times.
Well, MJ, it's been just wonderful to be in your garden, especially since the last time I was here, the season was a little bit different. So, and also this area that we're standing in wasn't here the last time. So it's wonderful to see the garden expansion, to talk about your experiences with growing good food at home and with incorporating food and family into everything that you do. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate you so much for having me.
Thank you, Tam. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with me and your friendship and your dreams and all the jokes. We got a good kiki all the time.
All the time.
An experience in my garden.
Yes.
And we're gonna have our favorite sandwich today.
Yes, we are. And
From
what is
the
that?
garden.
The BLT.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Tam.
you.